There we go. All right, then, ladies and gents. So that is where we left off yesterday. We left off with them talking about the size of the fireplace at the very top, how nothing, even a small cat could get through, and how the bottom was just enough for them to squeeze that woman up there. Now remember, these women are basically destroyed. Their throats, one of the younger woman, the mademoiselles, her throat was gouged out, like with massive gouges in it from someone's hands. Fingerprints is what they guess. And also, she had scratches all over her face before she died. The mom was found outside in the backyard, and her face, or her neck, was completely severed. So whenever they tried to pick her body up, her head fell off. And what else with her? She had her right arm and right leg were crushed completely, and her left tibia, which I think is right here. Your tibia is either right there or right here, was shattered. Is that your leg? All right, so your tibia right there was shattered as well. Now, it takes a lot of effort to shatter someone's tibia, especially. So now they're going to keep moving on to the windows of the chamber, because they mentioned that a few of those in the front were locked, but not the ones in the back. So let's discuss that one. There are 2 windows in this chamber. One of them is unobstructed by furniture and is wholly visible. The lower portion of the other is hidden from view by the head of the unwieldy bedstead, which is thrust close upon it. The former was found securely fastened from within. It resisted the utmost force of those who endeavored to raise it. A large gimlet hole had been pierced in its frame to the left, and a very stout nail was found fitted therein, nearly to the head. Upon examining the other window, a similar nail was seen similarly fitted in it, and a vigorous attempt to raise the sash failed also. The police were now entirely satisfied that egress, or entrance, had not been in these directions, and therefore it was thought of a matter of supererogation to withdraw the nails and open the windows. Supererogation, that sounds insane, but think just super. All right, anything super is going to be massive. Anything fantastic in its way. If you've never nailed shut a window before, it takes a lot of effort to get that nail back up, especially if you're just pulling on the window. My own examination was somewhat more particular, and was so for the reason I have just given. Because here it was, I knew that all apparent impossibilities must be proved to be not such in reality. So he's going to prove, right here, he said all these impossibilities, all these apparent impossibilities, a lot of eyes there, impossibilities must be proven possible. That's what he's saying there. That's why he said this should be a pretty simple case, actually, because the police, once they have found nothing to grow on, any clues, they stop. They can't do anything. It's impossible. But so what we have to do is make all these impossibilities possible. But to show, no, this is possible because of this reason. They have to really think outside the box, which is what an analyst does. I proceeded to think thus, a posteriori. The murderers did escape from one of these. Going on. One of these windows. This being so, they could not have refastened the sashes from the inside, or the locks, as they were found fastened. The consideration which put a stop through its obviousness to the scrutiny of the police in this quarter. Yet the sashes were fastened. They must then have the power of fastening themselves. There was no escape from this conclusion. I stepped to the unobstructed casement, withdrew the nail with some difficulty, and attempted to raise the sash. It resisted all my efforts, as I had anticipated. A concealed spring must, I now knew, exist, and this corroboration of my idea convinced me that my premises, at least, were correct. However mysterious still appeared the circumstances attending the nails. A careful search soon brought to light the hidden spring. I pressed it, and satisfied with the discovery, forbore to upraise the sash. So, he said, no, what, these windows it's impossible to lift them up from the outside. Heck, from the inside, because they're nailed shut, they should be impossible as well. But they had to have left somehow. And the windows are the only way they could have left. So, there must be a hidden catch. There must be a little secret little button you can press to open the window. That must be what happened. That's what he thought at first. So, he proved it. He said, I now knew this exists. Right here. A concealed spring must I now knew exist. And this cooperation of my idea convinced me that my premises at least were correct. However, mysterious still appeared the circumstances attending the nails. Then, a careful search soon brought to light the hidden spring. I press it and satisfied the discovery. I forbear to appraise the sash. So he found the hidden latch. Have any of y'all ever seen like it's I don't know exactly the name of it. There's a certain type of cabinet. You might have seen it with Declaration of Independence. They were stealing it. Nicolas Cage. What's that called? The movie. Nicolas Cage. He's finding the Declaration of Independence.
Yeah.
National Treasure.
Yeah, that's it.
You may have seen National Treasure before. They have one of these cabinets where you have to. It's like everything's a little puzzle piece. If you move this in this way, then this little hidden compartment will spring open. And if you move this way, then this will happen. That's essentially kind of what's happening. And the window seal, there's a secret button that if they pressed it, then it would spring open the window. And that's what he found. So there is now a way for them to have left the window and still locked it behind them. I now replaced the nail and regarded it attentively. A person passing out through this window might have reclosed it, and the spring would have caught. But the nail could not have been replaced. So now we had to figure out how did the nail get there. The conclusion was plain, and again narrowed in the field of my investigations. The assassins must have escaped through the other window. Supposing then the springs upon each sash to be the same, as was probable, there must be found a difference between the nails, or at least between the modes of their fixture. Getting upon the sacking of the bedstead, I looked over the headboard, minutely, at the second casement, passing my hand down behind the board. So he said, all right, now, not all of these nails can be the exact same, because they have to have escaped from one of these. If all of them are nailed shut, one of these nails has to be fake somewhere. So he went over to the headboard, and we were studying it really closely. The conclusion was plain and again narrowed in the field of investigations. Getting upon the sacking of the bedside, I looked over the headboard minutely at the second casement. Passing my hand down behind the board, I readily discovered and pressed the spring, which was, as I had supposed, identical in character with its neighbor. I now looked at the nail. It was as stout as the other and apparently fitted in the same manner, driven in nearly up to the head. So he said he found this nail that looked like it was driven all the way to the flatness of it. It was all flat, it looked like. But that's just what it appeared to look like. You could saw off a nail if you wanted to. You can go put it in a vise and then cut it off. And then you can just make it look like you have a tiny, tiny nail. You will say that I was puzzled. But if you think so, you must have misunderstood the nature of the inductions. So he's guessing here, these deductions. To use a sporting phrase, I had not been once at fault. The scent had never for an instant been lost. The scent of, I know what's going on. I'm going to chase after the truth here. The scent over here is the truth. The truth had never been lost. He knew exactly what he was doing. He was just following the trail. There was no flaw in any link of the chain. I had traced the secret to its ultimate result, and that result was the nail. It had, I say in every respect, the appearance of its fellow in the other window, but this fact was an absolute nullity. So, here we're going to get it. It had, in every respect, the appearance of its fellow in the other window. The nail did. But this fact was an absolute nullity. If you say something is null, it means it's not real. It's fake. It is undone. Conclusive as it might seem to be, when compared with the consideration that here, at this point, terminated the clue. There must be something wrong, I said, about the nail. I touched it in the head with about a quarter of an inch of the shank, and came out of my fingers. The rest of the shank was in the gimlet hole, where it had been broken off. So, basically, there was a hole, okay, where this nail, I have to be really careful here, this nail went, okay? What had happened was they had broken the nail right here. So this pointy end, essentially, was down here in the hole, but this head part of it was broken off. So you only really had barely anything in there. That way, it looks exactly like everything else, every other nail inside of this window, inside of these windows, but instead, it's barely holding on. It's not doing really anything. So the head, with about a quarter of an inch of the shank, came off with my fingers. You should do an arrow to that little picture I drew. The rest of the shank was in the gimlet hole where it had been broken off. The fracture was an old one. Ooh, so this has been like this for a long time. For its edges were encrusted with rust, and had apparently been accomplished by the blow of a hammer, which had partially embedded in the top of the bottom sash. The head portion of the nail now carefully replaced this head portion in the indentation whence I had taken it, and the resemblance to a perfect nail was complete. The fissure was invisible. Pressing the spring, I gently raised the sash for a few inches. The head went up with it, remaining firm in its bed. I closed the window, and the semblance of the whole nail was again perfect. So, they basically faked this nail being real. They broke it off right there so that it was not actually being held down at all. They could open and close the window and still make it look like it was blocked, as long as they knew what button to press to make the window spring open. I don't know what's happening with my voice. The riddle so far was now unriddled. The assassin had escaped through the window which looked upon the bed. Dropping of its own accord upon his exit, or perhaps purposefully closed, it had become fastened by the spring, and it was the retention of this spring which had been mistaken by the police for that of the nail. Further inquiry being thus considered unnecessary. So once the police saw that it was nailed shut, they were like, oh yeah, okay, that's it. They didn't realize there was a secret latch they could press to pop the window open. So they thought that it was nailed shut no matter what. All this is being spoken, if you remember correctly, by our main character, C. Auguste Dupin, and he is speaking to the narrator. Remember, right before this, before we left off yesterday, our narrator sat down in their house and said, don't worry, the killer, or someone who was close to the killer, is going to come see us soon. Here's a gun in case he comes by. And they're waiting for him as he's telling the narrator all this information. So now we finally have the how this murderer was able to get out of the house. How they were able to leave, and the police did not know how they left. That being said, they are still in the 4th story. This building is only 2 stories tall. If we doubled this height, could you jump from the top to the ground and be okay? Good luck, all right? That's some hardcore parkour right there. But no, you probably more than likely could not. So we still got to figure that out. How did this criminal, this murderer, jump off the building and still be okay? We have no idea how yet. So let's figure it out. The next question is that of the mode of descent, or how he got down to the ground. Upon this point, I had been satisfied in my walk with you around the building. So he saw this while he was walking around the building earlier. About 5 feet and a half from the casement in question, there runs a lightning rod. A lightning rod is literally just a rod of metal on top of a building so that lightning will hit the metal rod instead of the house. From this rod, it would have been impossible for anyone to reach the window itself, to say nothing of entering it. I observed, however, that shutters of the fourth story were of the peculiar kind called the Parisian carpenter's ferrades, a kind, rarely employed at the present day, but frequently seen upon very old mansions at Lyon and Bordeaux. They are in the form of an ordinary door, a single, not a folding door, except that the upper half is latticed or worked in open trellis, thus affording an excellent hold for the hands. So basically, in this modern era, most shutters are going to be not like the doors, but they're going to be like folders. Right? They fold back and they fold in. Fold back and fold over to cover it. But this one's kind of an old shutter. This one, instead of being foldable, actually is like a door and swings out. Now, if you have a swinged out shutter, you can hold on to it. Like if you open the door, you can hold on to it. So a shutter is just a small door you put on the outside of a window. So that was able to give someone a handhold on the outside of the window because this is an old way of having a shutter. In the present instance, so in the instance of the house, the present instance for our house or the mansion that they are trying to catch the killer in, these shutters are fully 3.5 feet broad. Goodness gracious. Look at the floor. You'll see each square is about 3 feet. So if you have 3.5 feet, it's about from there to here. That's a pretty large door. That's a pretty large handhold right there to hold on to. When we saw them from the rear of the house, they were both about half open. That is to say, they stood off at right angles from the wall. It is probable that the police, as well as myself, examined the back of the tenement, but if so, in looking at these ferrades in the line of their breadth, as they must have done, they did not perceive this great breadth itself, or at all even. Failed to take it into due consideration. So, remember, they're on the ground floor, looking all the way up 40 or 50 feet to the very top, and they see these shutters are open. They're not open all the way, they're open at 45-degree angles. Okay? That means someone didn't fully open them completely. And being so far away, being so high up in the air, they probably didn't see that this is a really large shutter, big enough for someone to grab hold of. In fact, having once satisfied themselves that no egress or entrance could have been made in this quarter, they would naturally bestow here a very cursory examination. So they would barely even look at this. Cursory, barely. They would barely give this an examination. It was clear to me, however, that the shutter belonging to the window at the head of the bed would, if swung fully back to the wall, reach to within 2 feet of the lightning rod. It was also evident that by exertion of a very unusual degree of activity and courage, an entrance into the window from the rod might have been thus effected. So, from the window, if you look at my window, all right, it's like if I open the window, any one of you could touch the little bars outside my window. There's little door bars outside. Now, if we were 40 feet up in the air, that'd be a little bit more terrifying. But what he's saying is it's just close enough where someone from the other house could have reached from the lightning rod and very bravely got through the window. Now, it would be really terrifying to do it, but someone could have done that. If they were strong enough, if they're athletic enough, and if they were brave enough. Someone could have done that. So they would have had to do this. They would be thus affected. This is the course of events they would have had to do. By reaching to the distance of 2.5 feet, which most of your arms are roughly, probably around 2.5 feet, maybe about 2 feet. We now suppose the shutter open to its whole extent. A robber might have taken a firm grasp on the trellis work, letting go then his hold upon the rod. Placing his feet securely against the wall, springing boldly from it, he might have swung the shutter so as to close it. And if we imagine the window open at the time, might have swung himself into the room. This is like a very Assassin's Creed style type of action, if you know what that movie is. They grabbed onto the window, the trellis work of it, then they swung into the window itself, think Spider-Man, and then shut the shutter behind them as they followed in, as they fell in, I guess. A lot of acrobatic stuff here. This would probably make Spider-Man very proud. I wish you to bear especially in mind that I had spoken of a very unusual degree of activity as requisite to success, and so hazardous and so difficult to feat. Someone had to be really active, to be really strong to be able to do this. It is my design to show you first that the thing might possibly have been accomplished. But secondly, and chiefly, I wish to impress upon you your understanding the very extraordinary, the almost preternatural, supernatural. Preternatural means supernatural. Character of that agility, which could have accomplished it. Now, this is a time way before parkour, so can't think about people who do parkour. Who is going to have the agility to do something like this? Who do you think? Could anyone just do it? No. But who works with their body constantly to be really agile, be able to move certain ways? Maybe for people's entertainment. Think about the circus here, right? Circus acrobats, they have this almost supernatural power over their bodies to be able to control them a certain way, with a certain agility to them. So that's what he's trying to impress upon the character of that agility. Who could have accomplished this? Who has that type of agility in their normal everyday life? You will say, no doubt, using the language of the law, that to make out my case, I should rather undervalue than insist upon a full estimation of the activity required in this matter. This may be the practice of the law, but it is not the usage of reason. My ultimate object is only the truth. My immediate purpose is to lead you to place in a juxtaposition that very unusual activity of which I have just spoken, with that very peculiar shrill or harsh and unequal voice, about whose nationality no two persons could be found to agree, and in whose utterance no syllabification could be detected. Lots of words here. What he is saying, I'm going to scoot it up some. What he's basically giving us a quick little detail of all the case in its entirety. All right? He said, I'm trying to make sure you understand who could have done this. Make sure to juxtaposition these two, all these ideas together, make them side by side so you can compare them. Someone who is agile. Someone who has this level of ability with their body. Someone who has a very peculiar, shrill, or harsh, and unequal voice. A strange voice. Someone whose nationality no one knows. So no one knows where they're from. Question mark. And in whose utterance no syllabification can be detected. No one could even identify a word that this shrill person spoke. Did not speak. He's listing out all these things so that we can better see them side by side, so we can compare them. Who could fit underneath all of these things? At these words, a vague, or very barely formed, and half-formed conception of the meaning of Dupin flitted over my mind. I seemed to be upon the verge of comprehension without power to comprehend. So he's almost there. He's thinking, kind of, maybe this. So he's almost there, but he can't quite get to the full comprehension. As men at times find themselves upon the brink of remembrance. He's like, you barely remember something. You're like, oh, come on. Without being able in the end to remember. My friend went on with his discourse, so with his discussion. So our narrator is almost there. He's thinking, I kind of almost get it. It's there on the edge of my tongue. You will see, he said, that I have shifted the question from the mode of egress to that of ingress. If egress means to get out, what does ingress mean? Get in, exactly. Ingress, think about going in. Getting in. So he's moved from people trying to leave, remember, because he was talking about the latch on the windowsill, all that good stuff, to how are people getting inside? How did he find his way inside of this building? It was my design to suggest that both were affected in the same manner at the same point. Let us now revert to the interior of the room. And his point that he was trying to make here is that how they got in is exactly how they got out. That window. Let us now revert to the interior of the room. So now we're going to talk about the inside of the room. Let us survey the appearances here. The drawers of the bureau, it is said, have been rifled, although many articles of apparel still remain within them. The conclusion here is absurd. It is a mere guess, a very silly one, and no more. So he admits this is a silly conclusion. It's a silly guess. Make sure to underline that one. The conclusion here is absurd. It is a mere guess, a very silly one. How are we to know that the articles found in the drawers were not all these drawers had originally contained? Notice, no one here, all the police, all the neighbors who walked in, all that good stuff, how did they know nothing was stolen? No one's been inside this house, remember? They don't have visitors. The only furnishings are on the very top floor. Kind of interesting. Madame L'Espagne, the mother, and her daughter, lived an exceedingly retired life, saw no company. They seldom went out, had little use for numerous changes of habiliment, or clothing. Changes of habits. That's habits. Sorry, not clothing, that's habits. Little use for changes of habits. Those found were at least of as good quality as any likely to be possessed for these ladies. If a thief had taken any, why did he not take the best? Why did he not take it all? In a word, why did he abandon 4,000 francs in gold to encumber himself with a bundle of linen? True, why did he take clothes and not all the $2 million almost worth of gold sitting there? The gold was abandoned. Nearly the whole sum mentioned by Monsieur Mignard, the banker, was discovered in bags upon the floor. I wish you, therefore, to discard from your thoughts the blundering idea of motive, engendered in the brains of the police by that portion of the evidence which speaks of money delivered at the door of the house. So basically, remember, our poor clerk, who is the banker's clerk, was arrested because he was the last person who saw these women alive. He said, you know what? Cut that out. Cut that out of your brain. There's no way that someone did this for money if they left all the money here. Completely leave it out. Coincidences 10 times as remarkable as this, the delivery of the money and murder committed within 3 days upon the party receiving it, happen to all of us every hour of our lives, without attracting even momentary notice. Coincidences in general are great stumbling blocks in the way of that class of thinkers who have been educated to know nothing of the theory of probabilities. Basically, coincidences happen all the time. Don't worry about that. Coincidences happen all the time. If you believe in coincidences. It said these coincidences usually throw you off if you are educated in the theory of probabilities. That theory to which the most glorious objects of human research are indebted for the most glorious of illustration. But in the present instance, had the gold been gone, the fact of its delivery 3 days before would have formed something more than a coincidence. If the gold was gone, if it was stolen along with everything else, or whatever else was stolen, then we could blame probably the clerk for stealing it. That would make much more sense. But since it's still there, then that's just a coincidence that they had it then. It would have been corroborative of this idea of motive. But under the real circumstances of the case, if we are to suppose gold the motive of this outrage, we must also imagine the perpetrator so vacillating, an idiot, as to have abandoned his gold and his motive together. So, if gold was... I'm going to go down with it. If gold was the object of their theft, we must also imagine the perpetrator, an idiot, as to have abandoned his gold and his motive together. Whoever stole this, our thief, our murderer, must also be an idiot if he left all the money he came there to steal. Telling you, I'm not going to murder somebody unless I have like a really good reason, or I'm going to get something really major out of it. Hopefully I'm never going to murder anyone. But if I would ever plan a murder, I'm going to get something out of it. So only an idiot would murder someone just for nothing whatsoever, just to do it. Doesn't make any sense. So we have to assume that this perpetrator, this perp, is an idiot. So, not only are they agile, not only does no one know their nationality, no one knows how they speak, they have a shrill voice, but also, for some strange reason, he's an idiot. All these things can combine to form an opinion. Keeping now steadily in mind the points to which I have drawn your attention, that peculiar voice, that unusual agility, and that startling absence of motive in a murder so singularly atrocious as this, let us glance at the butchery itself. Here's a woman strangled to death by manual strength and thrust up a chimney, head downward. Ordinary assassins employ no such modes of murder as this. Least of all do they thus dispose of the murdered. And the manner of thrusting the corpse up the chimney, you will that there was something excessively out of something altogether irreconcilable with our common notions of human action, even when we suppose the actors the most depraved of men. Think, too, how great must have been that strength which could have thrust the body up such an aperture, so forcibly that the united vigor of several persons was found barely sufficient to drag it down. So, they said, all right, no, let's forget about all these things together, and let's just think about who murdered this. This person, ordinary assassins don't kill people like this. They don't. It's really kind of uncommon. Least of all, do they dispose of the murdered in such a way. Why would you stuff the body up a chimney? Just like throw it out the window or bury it or do something normal. Why stuff it up the chimney? And even if you stuff it up the chimney, if that's your choice, okay, how great of strength do you have to be able to do that? It's kind of atrocious. It's kind of insane. Turn now to the other indications of the employment of a vigor most marvelous. On hearth were thick tresses. On the hearth were thick tresses. Very thick tresses of gray human hair. So, remember in their beginning, they found a large section of human hair on the ground. How many of y'all have ever pulled hair out before? Of your head. Now, Mr. Reynolds doesn't have a whole lot of hair left, but he's done this a couple times. And it hurts like crazy. Whenever you have, like, say, a hairbrush stuck in your hair and you're yanking, is it difficult to rip it out? It is. Hey, guys, it's horrible, but as kids, we're all kind of stupid sometimes. Girls, I've done this probably as well. But every guy has gone up to a girl before and yanked their ponytail. It's annoying. Don't do it. It's horrible. You might get slapped these days, and that you should be, all right? But even with pulling a girl's ponytail, you can't rip their hair out. Not the entire ponytail, at least. That would be pretty impressive. You make her bald like that. So, to be able to rip someone's hair, thick tresses of their hair out, massive sections of their hair out, takes a lot of strength. In fact, your hair, if I remember correctly, each hair follicle, each piece of hair can hold up to like 10 pounds, I think. It's been a while since I studied that. But I'm pretty sure it can hold up to 10 pounds, each hair, each strand of hair. These have been torn out by the roots. You are aware of the great force necessary in tearing dust from the head, even 20 or 30 hairs together. You saw the locks in question as well as myself. Their roots, a hideous sight, were clotted with fragments of the flesh of the scalp. Sure, a token of the prodigious power which had been exerted in uprooting perhaps 500,000 of hairs at a time. The throat of the old lady was not merely cut, but the head absolutely severed from the body. The instrument was a mere razor. I wish you also to look at the brutal ferocity of these deeds, at the bruises upon the body of Madame L'Espange. I did not speak. Monsieur Dumas and his worthy coadjutor, there we go. Remember, because that's Monsieur Dumas and the physician and the surgeon, doctor and surgeon. They were interviewed in the very beginning. He says, I'm not discrediting their ability. Have pronounced that they were inflicted by some obtuse instrument. Now, they guessed that they must have been beat by large instruments, by like a table leg or a bar of iron or something horrible like that. And they must have been wielded by a very strong man to have caused those wounds. For these gentlemen are very correct. The obtuse instrument was clearly the stone pavement in the yard, upon which the victim had fallen from the window which looked in upon the bed. This idea, however simple it may now seem, escaped the police for the same reason that the breadth of these shutters escaped them. Because, by the affair of the nails, their perceptions had been hermetically sealed against the possibility of the windows had ever been opened at all. So no one thought that she was thrown from the window, for the same reason that they thought no one entered from the windows, because of that fake nail. But we know now that that fake nail was fake, that it could have been opened easily. But the police never thought of it. If now, in addition to all these things, you have properly reflected upon the odd disorder of the chamber, we have gone so far as to combine the ideas of an agility astounding, a strength superhuman, a ferocity brutal, a butchery without motive, a grotesque and horror absolutely alien from humanity, and a voice foreign in tone to the ears of men of many nations, and devoid of all distinct or intelligible syllabification. Fancy word there for being able to speak. This right here is going to be a summary of what we know about our murderer. All of these things. An agility astounding, a strength superhuman, a ferocity brutal, a butchery without motive, a grotesque and horror, and a voice. A grotesque and horror, absolutely alien from humanity, describes the butchery without motive. A voice foreign in tone to the ears of men of many nations, and devoid of real speech. Syllabification, are able to pronounce words. So we know 6 things. What result then has ensued? What impression have I made upon your fancy? I felt a creeping of the flesh as Dupin asked me the question. A madman, I said, has done this deed. Some raving maniac escaped from a neighboring maison de santé, or a mental facility. In this time period, 1850s, madhouses were a really common thing, surprisingly, not like super common, but insane asylums. Basically, if you were deemed to be crazy, they wouldn't take care of you. They wouldn't try to make your family wouldn't make sure you're okay. They would give you to a mental institution, a mental facility, mason, descente, and they would literally just put you there with all the other crazies, they would call, and you'd be left there. They would have people there to make food. That was kind of pretty much it. You were basically locked in jail if you were too crazy. And this could work. It fits a lot of these things. Think about a madman, someone who's completely lost their mind, who has lost the ability to control their own body, can do amazing things. You've heard of moms picking up cars to save their children. That's a real thing. Once you lose the limiters in your brain, you can do a crazy amount of things. For instance, if you try to, it's as weird as it is, if you try to bite your finger off. Now your jaw strength is easily able to bite your finger off. Easily. But your brain will not let you. As soon as you try, your brain goes, nope, don't do it. But your jaw strength is easily able to do it. So your brain limits you and stops you from hurting yourself. But if you lose that ability to, your brain just unlocks itself and you use all your strength constantly, you're crazy. You're superhuman. You have agility astounding. You might, if you're crazy, be ferocious. You might butcher someone without caring about why. You may not be able to speak. You may be a raving lunatic. It fits all the ideas that we have listed here. Well, in some respects, he replied, your idea is not irrelevant. But the voices of madmen, even in their wildest paroxysms, or their wildest ravings, paroxysms, their greatest ravings, are never found to tally with that peculiar voice heard upon the stairs. Madmen are of some nation, and their language, however incoherent in its words, has always the coherence of syllabification. So even madmen still speak words. They might gibber a little bit, but their words are still usually there. Besides, the hair of a madman is not such as I now hold in my hand. I disentangled this little tuft from the rigidly clutched fingers of Madame l'Espagne. Tell me what you make of it. So, Madame l'Espagne was able to grab a couple of hairs. I disentangled this little tuft from the rigidly clutched fingers of Madame l'Espagne. She grabbed some hair. She grabbed hair before she died. So, in today's time, this would be a cut, clear case. Boom, done. They have DNA evidence. They can tell you exactly who it was. Case closed. Oh yeah, this is 1850. They don't have that. So, they have to figure out another way. They have to look at the hair and try to tell, hey, where did this hair come from? Does it look like someone else's hair? Does it look like something else's hair? Does it look right? Does it look wrong? Where did this hair come from? Dupin, I said, completely unnerved. This hair is most unusual. This is no human hair. Oh. I have not asserted that it is, said he. But before we decide this point, I wish you to glance at the little sketch I have here traced upon this paper. It is a facsimile drawing of what has been described in one portion of the testimony as dark bruises and deep indentations of fingernails upon the throat of Mademoiselle l'Espagne, and in another, by Messrs. Dumas and Etienne, as a series of livid spots, evidently the impression of fingers. So remember, Mademoiselle, the daughter, had indentations in her neck from someone choking her. That's what they have a little picture of, a facsimile drawing. You will perceive, continued my friend, spreading out the paper upon the table before us, that this drawing gives the idea of a firm and fixed hold. There is no slipping apparent. Each finger has retained, possibly until the death of the victim, the fearful grasp by which it originally embedded itself. Attempt now to place all your fingers at the same time in their respective impressions as you see them. So, we can give this a shot. My hand, put it right here. Boom. Someone else want to try to put their hand up there and see if it matches? Would any of y'all's hand match? You don't think? Some of y'all's hand might be close. I have pretty small hands. So some of your hands might be somewhat close. But what if we said, this person is obviously amazingly strong, so they're going to have hands bigger than mine probably, all right? So what if their hands are like this big? Now, of course, it's going to be over my hand. Now, my hand does not fit in there. They have the fingertips. They have the fingernail, the finger descriptions that are indentations in this woman's neck. So, if my hand only reaches, as weird as this sounds, as my hand only reaches this far on my neck, we know that this could be me. But if the fingerprints were really far back behind my neck, right, that means that someone else did this. It's another little good piece of information that we can see, the impression of the fingers. You will perceive, continue my friend, spreading the paper up on the table, that this drawing gives the idea of a firm fixed hold. We discussed that already. Don't need to reread it. I made the attempt in vain. We are possibly not giving this matter a fair trial, he said. The paper is spread out upon a plain surface, but the human throat is cylindrical. It's a cylinder. Here's a billet of wood, the circumference of which is about that of a throat. Wrap the drawing around it and try the experiment again. So, in case you didn't know, your neck is curved. It's a cylinder, all right? So they had the drawing of the hand on a flat surface. They said, no, that's not really all that fair, all right? Let's make sure to see if we curve it around, if your fingers will match then. Maybe, right? Changes things a little bit. So he gives them a billet of wood. I'll have here as my cup to wrap the paper around. There you go. So they can test to see if his fingerprints would match. Now that I've ruined that piece of paper. I did so, but the difficulty was even more obvious than before. This, I said, is the mark of no human hand. Read now, replied Dupin, this passage from Cuvier. It was a minute and anatomical and generally descriptive account of the large, fulvous orangutan of the East Indian Islands. The gigantic stature, the prodigious strength and activity, the wild ferocity and the imitative propensities of these mammalia are sufficiently well known to all. I understand the full horrors of the murder at once. Have you ever seen an orangutan at the zoo, right? Have you ever realized how large an orangutan is? Now, I know they look kind of goofy. They're sitting there on the edge of the edge of their enclosures at the Memphis Zoo. And, I mean, they're kind of funny looking. They're kind of dopey. They sit there and they scratch their belly buttons as they sit there. Orangutan. Now, we have changed here in the past, 100 years since this story was released. We've changed the spelling of orangutan a little bit, orangutan. But orangutans are pretty dang big animals. They're surprisingly large. Here's an image. There you go. So an orangutan is a pretty large creature. For sure, whenever they stand up, they're only about 4 or 5 feet, maybe. Well, that's about this high. They're about 4.5 to 5 feet standing up. They have hunched shoulders and stuff, so they don't stand up all the way. But they're amazingly strong. What orangutans do is their hands are so big and powerful that they can literally hang and just sit there for hours on end. They have powerful, powerful strength in their hands. And of course, back in this time period, whenever this story was written, it was very common for people to make these types of animals, orangutans and all monkeys, usually in general, of that family, really evil sounding. They were horrible creatures. They would attack over nothing. Of course, if you're in a creature's if you're in a creature's area, they're going to attack you because that's their area. The description of the digits, said I as I made an end of reading, is in exact accordance with this drawing. I see that no animal but an orangutan of the species here mentioned could have impressed the indentations as you have traced them. This tuft of tawny hair, tawny is like a orangish red. 2 is identical in character with that of the beast of Cuvier. But I cannot possibly comprehend the particulars of this frightful mystery. Besides, there were 2 voices heard in contention, and one of them was unquestionably the voice of a Frenchman. So tawny right here, the tuft of tawny hair, it's going to be reddish hair. He said, but there were obviously 2 voices that were angry at each other, they're in contention. And one of them was for sure a Frenchman, as everyone agreed on. True. And you will remember an expression attributed almost unanimously. It's a fun, fancy word there. Almost unanimously. Always used for one reason. That's what almost unanimously means. It's almost always used for this one reason, this word. By the evidence to this voice, the expression, mon Dieu. This, under the circumstances, has been justly characterized by one of the witnesses, Montani, the confectioner, as an expression of remonstrance, of expostulation upon these 2 words, mon Dieu, because it just expels out of you. It just shouts it out almost. By God. Or we would say it's horrible and it's sacrilegious. A lot of people say the name of Jesus Christ as an expression of when they're surprised. Upon these 2 words, therefore, I have mainly built my hopes of the full solution of the riddle. A Frenchman was cognizant or aware of the murder. Cognizant means aware. So for sure, someone who was French knew about this murder. It is possible, indeed it is far more than probable, that he was innocent of all participation in the bloody transactions which took place. The orangutan may have escaped from him. He may have traced it to the chamber, but under the agitating circumstances which ensued, he could never have recaptured it. It is still at large. I will not pursue these guesses, for I have no right to call them more, since the shades of reflection upon which they are based are scarcely of sufficient depth to be appreciable by my own intellect. And since I could not pretend to make them intelligible to the understanding of another, we will call them guesses then, and speak of them as such. If the Frenchman in question is indeed, as I suppose, innocent of this atrocity, this advertisement, which I left last night upon our return home at the office of Le Monde, a paper devoted to the shipping interest and much sought by sailors, will bring him to our residence. He handed me a paper, and I read it thus. So, to catch this guy who obviously knew about the orangutans and how the orangutan murdered somebody, they put out a flyer. They put out a message in a local paper that a lot of sailors would go after. They would try to look through. This advertisement reads like this. Caught in the Bois de Boulogne, early in the morning of the morning of the murder, a very large tawny orangutan of the Bornese species. The owner, who is ascertained to be a sailor belonging to a Maltese vessel, may have the animal again upon identifying it as satisfactorily and paying a few charges arising from its capture and keeping. Call that number Rue Faubourg Saint-Germain. So, they put out an advertisement. They have caught an orangutan, and they're willing to give it back to its owner for a fee, for a finder's fee. This automatically if the guy has lost his orangutan and it's gone on a killing rampage, we'll get him there very, very quickly. How was it possible, I asked, that you should know the man to be a sailor and belonging to a Maltese vessel? That's completely new information here. I do not know it, said Dupin. I'm not sure of it. Here, however, is a small piece of ribbon, which, from its form and from its greasy appearance, has evidently been used in tying the hair of one of these long queues, of which sailors are so fond. Moreover, this knot is one of which few besides sailors can tie. It is peculiar to the Maltese. I picked the ribbon up at the foot of the lightning rod. It could not have belonged to either of the deceased. So, how he found out that this guy is a sailor is a knot. Women, y'all have usually you use a hair tie. Back then they would use ribbons. Anyone with long hair would use ribbons to tie their hair back. And apparently, he found a ribbon that used to tie hair back that's really greasy because sailors sweat a lot. And he said that the knot on the hair tie is a knot that only the Maltese usually use. So he can guess that it's a Maltese sailor. It could not have belonged to either of the deceased. Now, if, after all, I am wrong in my induction from this ribbon, that the Frenchman was a sailor belonging to a Maltese vessel, still, I can have done no harm in saying what I did in the advertisement. If I am in error, he will merely suppose that I have been misled by some circumstance into which he will not take the trouble to inquire. But if I am right, a great point is gained. Cognizant or aware, we've seen that word a few times now, so let's make sure that we understand it. Aware, although innocent of the murder, the Frenchman will naturally hesitate about replying to the advertisement. Naturally. About demanding the orangutan, he will reason thus. I am innocent. I am poor. My orangutan is of great value. To one in my circumstances, a fortune of itself. Why should I lose it through idle apprehensions of danger? Here it is, within my grasp. It was found in the Bois de Boulogne, at a vast distance from the scene of that butchery. How can it ever be suspected that a brute beast should have done the deed? The police are at fault. They have failed to procure the slightest clue. So he's going through what this sailor would think. What the sailor would think. You've done this before yourself. You've reasoned before, hey, if I did this, they'll probably think this and do that because of that reason. You've all done it yourself. He's just taking it to a level of intensity, of breaking down. This is why the sailor would come and talk to us if we gave him this advertisement. Why would he care? Why would he be afraid? Yeah, he knows this orangutan is really important. It's really valuable, a big animal like this. So why should he just leave it there? He should want it back. It was found at the other side of the city. How could any police officer link me to the scene if it's so far away? No one's going to think a beast like an orangutan is going to do this deed, kill someone. This is the police's fault. They haven't found any clues yet, so it's on them. Should they even trace the animal, it would be impossible to prove me aware of the murder, or to implicate me in guilt on account of that awareness. Above all, I am known. The advertiser designates me as the possessor of the beast. I am not sure to what limit his knowledge may extend. So this sailor does not know how much the person who created this advertisement, Dupin, knows about him. Should I avoid claiming a property of so great value, which it is known that I possess, I will render the animal, at least, liable to suspicion. It is not my policy to attract attention, either to myself or to the beast. I will answer the advertisement, get the orangutan, and keep it close until this matter has blown over. That is what he says, Dupin says, that this sailor is thinking, and why the sailor would, in fact, just about no matter what, come and take the orangutan from him. At this moment, we heard a step upon the stairs. Ooh. So now we're going to actually get the sailor coming up. Be ready, said Dupin, with your pistols, but neither use them nor show them until at a signal from myself. The front door of the house had been left open, and the visitor had entered without ringing and advanced several steps upon the staircase. Now, however, he seemed to hesitate. Presently, he heard him descending. Dupin was moving quickly to the door when we again heard him coming up. He did not turn back a second time, but stepped up with decision and rapped at the door of our chamber. "Come in," said Dupin, in a cheerful and hearty tone. And that's where we're going to stop, ladies and gents, for today.